I don't want to go to a group home, I pleaded, tears streaming down my face as I clutched the sleeve of my stepfather's expensive jacket. Why can't I stay here? This is Mom's house. Richard just sneered, peeling my fingers off his arm with a look of disgust. And what do you suggest, Abigail? That I, a man in the prime of his life, become your legal guardian? You're a stranger to me. It's only for 3 years until you're 18. It's not my fault your mother didn't have any other family to dump you on. He turned away, adjusting his tie in the hall mirror, his reflection cold and dismissive. I've waited long enough to start living my life. Before I continue the story, I'd like to ask you to like this video. Your support is incredibly important to us. Thank you. And now enjoy the story. No, he wasn't joking. He was really going to send me, a 15-year-old girl, into the foster care system just days after my mother's funeral. The smell of condolence flowers still lingered in the air. I can live alone, I said, my voice trembling but determined. I know how to cook, how to clean. You wouldn't even have to see me, Richard. Please, for Mom's sake. He turned from the mirror and stared at me for a long, hard moment, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Are you really that stupid? Or are you just pretending? Did you actually believe a man like me would marry a sick, dying woman out of love? I'm a businessman, kid. It was a transaction. I knew she was on her way out. I could barely wait for it to be over. So you're off to a group home, and I'm finally going to enjoy the fruits of my patience. Horror, cold and sharp, washed over me. How could he say that? My mother, Angela, had adored him. She believed he was her final gift from the universe. I had been so happy that her last days were filled with what I thought was love and laughter. Now I saw it was all a lie. When the social worker from Child Protective Services arrived, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, my tears had dried up, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Richard walked me to the door with a smug, triumphant smile. I stopped on the threshold, looked him straight in the eye, and my voice was steady when I said, I will come back for this house. It's not yours. He just chuckled, a low, condescending sound. I highly doubt that, little girl. Now run along. I picked up my small bag of belongings, a few clothes, a photo of my mom, and the locket she gave me, and followed the woman out. As we got into the car, she gave me a sympathetic look. Don't you worry, sweetie. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales. The world is round for a reason. What goes around comes around. She was right. The 3 years flew by, probably because I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself. I learned quickly that in a place like Northwood Group Home, you either sink or swim. And I was my mother's daughter, a swimmer. Maybe I swam because on my very first day, I found an unlikely protector. His name was Leo. He was 17, one of the oldest kids there, feared by the staff and respected by the others. He was smart, strong, and had a fierce sense of justice that didn't always align with the rules. I learned all that later. On that first day, all I saw was a tall guy with intense eyes quietly swiping a staff member's phone from her purse. My mother had taught me to stand up for what's right. Without a second thought, I marched right up to him, snatched the phone from his hand, and started lecturing him. What do you think you're doing? Give that back. He looked at me, utterly stunned, and then burst out laughing. Well, look what we have here. You got a lot of nerve, short stuff, he said, easily twisting my arm and taking the phone back. He tapped the screen a few times, then shoved it back into the woman's purse. Before I could say another word, he grabbed my arm and dragged me outside into the yard. Let go of me, I yelled, trying to wrench my arm free. He looked at me with genuine curiosity. You're not screaming or crying like the other girls. You wish, I shot back, and then using a move my mom had taught me for self-defense, I stomped on his foot and kicked him hard in the shin. He howled in pain. Are you crazy? I was trying to explain. Explain what? How you're a common thief. He let out a long, dramatic sigh. Listen, that staff member, Mrs. Gable, she's a nightmare. She's got it in for this new kid, Paul. His mom's in jail for defending herself against his abusive dad. The kid is messed up and acting out, And she's been filming him, trying to build a case to get him sent to a psychiatric facility. I've just been deleting the videos. This is the second phone she's had to get repaired this month. I stared at him, my anger melting away into admiration. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Yeah, well, now you do, he said, rubbing his shin. You pack a punch for a little thing. If you ever need help, I said, my voice full of conviction, let me know. I'm not afraid of anything. From that day on, we were inseparable. He was the only one who knew my whole story. About Richard, the house, and the inheritance my mother had worked her whole life to build. My mom, Angela, had also grown up in the system. She promised herself she'd make something of her life. While others partied, she studied. She worked nights to put herself through college, then opened a small bakery, then another, until she had a successful local chain. She was a fighter right to the very end. And you're okay with her being gone? Leo asked me one evening as we sat under the big oak tree by the gate, our secret spot. I made my peace with it a long time ago, I said quietly. I saw how much pain she was in. The illness was eating her away. For her, death was a release from that. You're the strongest person I know, Abby, he said, bumping his shoulder against mine. That was one of our last nights together. A few months later, Leo aged out of the system and left to join the army. I'll be back for you, he promised, his voice rough with emotion. I'll get through basics, save some money, and by the time I'm back, you'll be all grown up. Yeah, right? I said, trying to sound tough, but my heart ached. He was the only family I had left. True to his word, he wrote letters. His friendship, even from thousands of miles away, gave me the strength to get through the next few years. Before I knew it, it was my 18th birthday. I walked out of those gates a free woman. The air itself tasted different. I caught a ride with a kind couple who drove me all the way back to my hometown. They insisted on giving me their address. If anything's wrong, you come straight to us, you hear? We have a spare room. I stood in front of my house, my mother's house, and my heart sank. Lights were on. Music was playing. A new expensive car was in the driveway. Someone else was living there. I rang the bell. A woman I'd never seen before, dripping in jewelry, opened the door. Can I help you? She asked, her tone dripping with disdain. This is my house, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She laughed in my face, a shrill, ugly sound. Her house. Honey, do you have any idea how much this place is worth? Get lost before I call the cops on you for trespassing. The door slammed shut. Defeated, I knew I couldn't go to the police with nothing but my word. Then I remembered something my mother had said long ago when she was signing some papers. The most important things are protected. She had taken me to see her estate lawyer, a kind old man named Mr. Davison, and she had given me her favorite locket. Never take this off, Abby. It's more important than you know. The next morning, I found the office of Davison and Sons. Mr. Davison was retired, but his son now ran the firm. I explained who I was, my voice shaking as I told him the whole story. He listened patiently, his expression growing more serious with every word. Your mother was a very smart and cautious woman, he said finally. She came to see my father a month before she passed away, right after she married Richard. She had a bad feeling. She didn't just write a will. She set up an irrevocable trust. The house, the business, her savings, it all went into it. You are the sole beneficiary. But how did Richard sell the house? I asked, confused. He couldn't have. Not legally, Mr. Davison explained, leaning forward. To access the trust, the beneficiary, you must be present. And you must present a specific personal item that your mother designated as a key. A unique, non-replicable identifier. My hand flew to my neck. The locket. I opened it. Inside, nestled behind a tiny picture of my mom and me, was a minuscule, folded piece of paper with a sequence of numbers and letters. Mr. Davison's eyes widened. That's it. That's the key. Richard must have hired an imposter and used a corrupt notary to forge a fake will. He bypassed the trust entirely, which is a serious federal crime, Abigail. My mind was reeling, but one thought cut through the chaos. Leo. He had told me in his last letter that he'd left the army and joined the police force back home. He wanted to be one of the good guys. I pulled out his number. Minutes later, I was explaining everything to Detective Leo Martinez. The boy I knew was gone, replaced by a man with a calm, steady authority, but his eyes were the same. When I finished, he looked at the senior detective sitting next to him. "It's her house, sir. I can vouch for that." The whole group home knew her story. The investigation moved swiftly. Armed with the trust documents from Mr. Davison, the police descended on Richard. He was arrogant and dismissive at first. "I have no idea who this girl is." The girl who claimed the inheritance was Abigail Williams. We argued constantly at the notary's office. It was all very convincing theater to show we weren't in cahoots. "So you didn't notice it wasn't the same 15-year-old girl who lived with you for months?" the detective asked, raising an eyebrow. "I barely looked at her," Richard scoffed. The detective just nodded to Leo. "Bring her in." Leo returned with a terrified-looking young woman who vaguely resembled me. The moment she saw Richard, she lunged at him. "Where's my money? You promised me there'd be no trouble. I'm not going to prison for you. I'll tell them everything." Richard's face went white. He had hired a struggling actress from a local community theater, never imagining they'd track her down so easily. 2 months later, I walked back into my home. The money from Richard's frozen accounts was enough to pay back the innocent family who had bought the house. The rest of my inheritance, though significantly depleted by Richard's lavish spending, was returned to me. Richard and his accomplice were facing years in prison for fraud and conspiracy. Leo walked through the rooms, a look of awe on his face. "Wow. I knew you said your mom was successful, but I thought you were exaggerating a little." I laughed as I set the table for our celebration dinner. "What, you disappointed?" "No, just none of my friends live in a place like this." "Go on, pour the wine." "I'll be right back," I said, disappearing to change. I had bought a new dress for this day. When I came out, Leo's jaw dropped. "Abby, you look incredible." "It's just me, Leo," I said, walking right up to him. "And I seem to recall you once told a crying girl with a scraped knee that if she didn't stop crying, you'd never marry her." "Well, I've stopped." He looked stunned. "Abby, you'd really go for a guy like me? I'm just a cop. It'll be a long time before I'm making good money." "And you're—" "I'm what, Leo? Does any of this change who I am inside?" A slow smile spread across his face. He pulled me into a hug. "You always know just what to say." He held me for a long moment, then pulled back slightly. "There's something else. Something I found when we were processing the evidence from Richard's office." He handed me a small sealed envelope. "It's from your mom." It was hidden in her old desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a letter, in my mother's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Abby, if you are reading this, it means the worst has happened, and Richard has shown his true colors. I am so sorry, but know that I took steps to protect you. The trust is your fortress, and the locket is its key. But there is one more piece to the puzzle. One more guardian I put in place for you. His name is Leo Martinez. I knew of him long before you met. His mother was a kind woman who worked for me at my first bakery. She died tragically, and Leo was lost to the system. I couldn't adopt him legally without raising suspicion, but I made a promise to his mother that I would watch over him. I arranged for an anonymous donation to be made to the Northwood home, ensuring he had books, better clothes, a chance. I knew he had a good heart, a protector's spirit. I prayed that you would find each other, that he would be the friend and family you needed when I was gone. It seems my prayers were answered." Tears streamed down my face as I looked up at Leo, who was watching me with a confused expression. I handed him the letter. He read it, his eyes widening in shock. She was the one who sent the anonymous Christmas gifts every year? The new basketballs for the court? The funding for the library? He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She knew you," I cried, throwing my arms around him. "She knew you would protect me. She chose you." He held me tightly, and in that moment, all the pieces of our lives clicked into place. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan. A mother's final, desperate, and brilliant plan to ensure her daughter would never be alone. "You know," he said, his voice soft against my hair, "I want a boy and a girl." I nodded against his chest, my heart full. "Me too. But only after I finish college." "Deal," he whispered. By the time I defended my thesis, we weren't just husband and wife. We were about to become parents, ready to build our own future on the unshakable foundation a loving mother had laid for us long ago. If you enjoyed this story, please support us by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Perhaps this video will find someone who needs to hear it. Stay with us, we tell life stories. Take care.